Hey guys, it's Miss Thomas here, and I'm going to talk to you about taking your paper sculpture, your paper word sculpture here. You can see it's your three-dimensional object. Now you have a choice. You can work from life, you can look at this and draw from this, or you can take a photo of it and work from the photo. I'm choosing to work from the photo. Supplies, I personally really like drawing with mechanical pencils. So I have my trusty mechanical pencil right here. I have my two pen erasers, of which I've discussed before, the Factus BM2 and the Tombow Mono Zero eraser. And you can see the different sizes and imagine what makes those so fabulous. I have my erasers and my kneaded eraser. Don't really need the sharpener, but if it were a regular pencil, I'd need that sharpener. Also, I wanted to introduce you to the blending stump and the cleaner of the blending stump. So blending stump, and then this is a very fine tooth sandpaper, and as it gets dirty, you can just rip them off. And then that helps clean your stump, so your stump is not going to smear things it doesn't need to smear. So now I have a cleaner stump. Okay. I'm going to put on the music and get to work. So in this sketching method, what you can do is you can put in a really rough grid. You're not using a ruler necessarily to measure this, but if you use your whole arm, you can probably draw a pretty straight line. I am also measuring and just kind of guesstimating that grid. You still want to make sure it's straight. If you look at it and it looks really crooked, erase it and fix it, please. Otherwise, this doesn't really work. And here I'm cleaning some of the sketch mark around my lines. So first you're going to do just a general gesture of each letter and all the shapes. What are their general sizes? You use that grid to help you stay in proportions. You want to keep it light till you get it right. Draw really, really, really softly, and you're moving your whole arm or from your elbow. So you're working from your shoulder, your elbow, more than your wrist, because you're getting those general sweeping shapes on your paper. How big? You're looking at those lines on your paper and recording it with your pencil, or on your reference and recording it with your pencil. Here I'm drawing a little bit more from my wrist, but even then, like with round things, I'm drawing from my shoulder and my arm. But I am still checking those basic angles using my pencil. Now I'm going to refine those general shapes by drawing in the contour edges. It's going to be a little bit dark, a slightly darker line, a little bit more refined. And here you might be drawing a little bit more from your wrist because you're not making these big sweeping gestures. But you're still using your reference to check those angles and to measure. Being sure to record the shapes that your shadows create. But you want to do that very, very lightly or very softly so that when you put in your values, you're not seeing those edge lines. And here I've gone ahead and sped myself up. Before I was showing you in real time how long it really does take me. I'm refining. If it's not working out, I erase it and try again. Check my angles. Sketch in those cast shadows from your light source. My N wasn't in the right spot. I fixed it. I had a professor that used to say, don't let the devil get you. If you see something wrong, proportionally, you gotta fix it. And by the devil, he meant laziness. If you see it's wrong, you gotta fix it. Let's try it, even if you really don't want to. So really trying to figure out what are those contour lines. Now I'm cleaning up with my pencil eraser, my other eraser, just cleaning up some of the sketchiness, dusting it off. Now it looks like we're ready to shade. So first I gotta clean it up a little bit more. Make those lines real thin and faint, because eventually you're not even going to see the lines, because all you're going to see is shading, because ideally you're shading within the lines. So I'm starting with my 4H pencil. You want to begin with a hard graphite first. You can always blend it, and you want to think about, you're going pretty lightly. And you can go back and forth kind of fast, but as you're moving your pencil across the paper, I really recommend you do that part very slowly, because that's what will give you a nice even layer or coat of your graphite. Here I've already started some more layering to get certain parts a little bit darker. And when you're looking at your reference, you want to think, what shape is that value creating? And how dark is it? Is it a 1, which is white paper, or is it a 5, which is right in the middle, or is it a 10, which is super dark black? You work your way up to those darker blacks and darker grays. But it is important to eventually include them, because that's what kind of puts you in the next category of your art process. It shows a kind of confidence. It's a scary leap to make, but it's worth it once you see the dimension that just a few dark grays and bits of black can create. So now I shaded one direction, and then the second layer I went over it in the opposite direction, and now I'm going over it in yet another direction. So that's called crossing your contour when you shade. And now I'm creating some darker values just through pressing a tiny bit harder. Yes, it's also layering, but I'm pressing harder and it's becoming darker. And the reason you do cross contours is to kind of like, it just helps create a more even coat of shade of value. So now I moved on to my HB pencil, which is a regular number 2 pencil, but I'm still going very, very lightly, working with those soft layers to create those transitions and dimensions. All the while you're using your reference to compare and contrast, using those critical thinking skills to ask yourself, what do I need to do? So now I'm using my stump to blend those layers together. It's going to create a really soft, airy texture. As I'm blending, I'm not going back and forth the whole time with the tip of the stump. I'm picking it up each time. When you go back and forth, it ends up usually creating a pretty big smudgy mess. And you can always use your fingertips. That's a favorite of mine. Or your fingertip with a paper towel wrapped around it. So now that I have a nice, soft, blended layer, I'm going back over it to create a little bit more contrast and darker values through layering. It's nice to blend one of those first, especially if you have a paper that's really toothy and you can see the texture of the paper through your shading. It can be really nice to blend so you can kind of hide the texture of that paper. But you might want the texture of that paper. You may have purchased that paper specifically for its texture. I don't know. But it is a nice little trick. And then if you shade outside the lines a little bit, you just get an eraser and clean it up. It's easier to go outside the lines and clean it up than it is to fill in the little halo around the line if you need that. Another thing, those pencil erasers, they're just really great subtractive tools. Let's say you need just a tiny halo of white around an edge. The clip pen erasers can really help out with things like that. Or your kneaded eraser, if you can pinch it into a point, that point can erase a tiny little white sliver into an area. But it's all about layering, all about asking yourself those questions over and over. How light does this need to be? How dark does this need to be? What shape does that value create? It might be an organic shape, it might be more geometric looking shape. But you are kind of simplifying a little bit. You are not a machine. Yes, you can see infinitely more value transitions than most cameras can capture, but it doesn't mean you have to draw all of them. That'll drive you crazy. You are going to push yourself to do your best, but also recognize that at a certain point you might have to let go and just move on. But I do want to encourage you to push yourself in the realms of contrast. So working with those darker darks and the lighter lights, like where are the darkest darks, where are the brightest whites on your drawing. Right now mine is still in the very, very gray area because that's where most of your drawing is going to be as you're working. It's more towards the end that you start putting in those darker darks and whiter whites, so it stays in that gray area, but you don't want to leave it there. I know that's where most of us are comfortable, but I want to push you to see what you can do by adding some of those darker darks as you towards the end as you go. And here I am. I go back and forth pretty fast, but I move across the paper pretty slowly, and that's what'll get you an even coat. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and finally sped this up. Sorry that I let that take a while, but I'm considering layering. I'm considering pressure. I'm thinking about which pencil am I using. Does it need to be a harder pencil that gives me a softer, lighter line, or does it need to be a darker, a darker pencil that'll give me a deeper shade or value? And in these new areas that I haven't blended yet, I'm going ahead and blending with my stump. I'm drawing in those white highlights that are underneath the strip of paper, underneath that W. clean off those eraser marks. Be careful when you get rid of them. You don't want to smudge your drawing when you're dusting away the eraser bits. But see, that's when I added that a little bit more darkness, it really kind of helped to make that W pop. Now I'm starting on the A. I'm smudging. And this, I smudge, I cross contour the smudge, and you can see how nice and soft, and that made it even darker. And then went back over it the opposite direction, the cast shadow of the A. I am going to add a little bit of value on the background just so that it has a little bit more variety, because if you look at your reference, I guarantee it's not, there are some lighter grays on that background. It's not all bright white. And around about now is when my camera battery died and I stopped. But as you shade, please use your critical thinking to assess just how dark or how light your values are. Use your reference to compare and contrast. When shading, consider your use of pressure, layering, and blending. Ask yourself, do I add more, or do I need to take away? What shape does this value create? What number does this value fall onto on the value scale? Is it a 7 or is it a 9? Do your best to cross your contours when adding a new layer and push your contrast. Try not to live in the middle gray area of the value scale. It only takes a little bit of those darks to create a more 3D effect. Don't forget your cast shadows, reflected light, or little peaks of light. Happy making!